Welcome to the Resilient Retail Game Plan, a podcast for anyone wanting to start, grow or scale a profitable creative product business with me, Catherine Erdley. The Resilient Retail Game Plan is a podcast dedicated to one thing, breaking down the concepts and tools that I've gathered from 20 years in the retail industry and showing you how you can use them in your business. This is the real nuts and bolts of running a successful product business, broken down in an easy, accessible way. This is not a podcast about learning how to make your business look good. It's the tools and techniques that will make you and your business feel good. Confidently plan, launch and manage your products, and feel in control of your sales numbers and cash flow to help you build a resilient retail business. Welcome, it's the Resilient Retail Game Plan with me, your host, Catherine Erdley, as well as the founder of the Resilient Retail Club, which is my membership group and consultancy for product businesses. Today, I'm joined on the podcast by Rob Smith. He is an expert in live streaming, and he has worked with several different companies that have used live streaming to grow their sales in both the e-commerce space as well as bricks and mortar. So he is going to delve in today about this technology, why it's so important, and most importantly, share some tips about what to think about if you've ever thought about getting started with live streaming. Rob, thank you so much for joining me today. Do you want to start off by introducing yourself and your background?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I'm Rob from just outside Liverpool originally. I've been involved in high growth, fast paced startups for the last 5 or 6 years. The first brand that I was really involved in from a startup perspective was a mobile accessories brand based in London. We raised $2.5 million on Indiegogo, the most successful crowdfunding campaign for mobile accessories ever. So you can imagine that's a lot of phone cases. And working with those guys was great fun, and it really taught me a lot, particularly around the power of content, but also the importance of community. One of the key outcomes of working with the team was how valuable retail is as well. And that led me being headhunted to working for a retailer. And my role was essentially curating the edit of technology and innovation brands for retailers like Selfridges and Neiman Marcus. And I think at our peak, it was around about 12 stores across the world, which was incredibly good fun. And my role was very much on that as a head of partnership. So curating brands, but also finding the storytellers to help reach new customers and tell that brand story. Leading on from there, it was very much the pandemic was not easy as a bricks and mortar heavy retailer. And that essentially led me down the path of, okay, well, we have a great store. We had great staff. We've got lots of products to sell, but crucially, we don't have any customers to buy our products. So the customer couldn't or wouldn't come to us, then we would have to go to the customer. And that's where this sort of journey into live stream really began. And yeah, that kind of brings us up to speed.
That's fantastic. And obviously, today we're going to be talking a lot about live streaming because I think it's such a fascinating phenomenon. And you mentioned there about the power of content. Do you think that's behind the growth in live streaming, or why? What do you think particularly makes live streaming so valuable?
I think the power of content it's never more prevalent than ever. The world is moving so fast, and it is a mobile first world. So the sheer volume of content created and consumed is only going to grow and grow and grow. And why is live streaming becoming so valuable? For me, it's such a democratic way of conducting retail. Anybody can be a brand and anyone can be a retailer. So everyone has a smartphone, therefore anyone can be a brand or a retailer. And obviously brands such as Shopify just democratizing how easy it is to have an e-commerce platform or a platform to tell your stories. It's only going to grow and grow.
I love that, democratizing. So do you think then, this is kind of a side question, but often one of the things that comes up when I talk to people about live streaming is that they struggle with the idea of doing it because they feel like it has to be polished, it has to be sort of really super professional. But from what you're saying then, do you think that the customers getting more and more used to it just being, well, like you say, like somebody in their phone?
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I think the way I like to describe it to people and the way I look at it is if you're as a brand wanting to create one piece of content highly polished in a studio, that might cost you £10,000.
Right.
However, if you can kind of expect but reward the community for doing all that heavy lifting for you, that £10,000 is going to go so much further and you're going to get so much more content from it. That's where user generated content in that sense is so powerful, because it is real, it's raw. You're not feeling like you're getting sold to, which highly polished studio edited content sometimes can feel like that.
Feels like an advert.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, it is.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, it's for sure. But it feels more like an advert you might be used to seeing on TV than somebody with their smartphone.
You want people who look like you, who sound like you, someone that you can relate to, and ultimately that's the way to scale. If you can give your community and creators the tools to be your brand ambassadors and to do all that hard work for you, then ultimately that is a way to grow and grow quickly, and in my opinion relatively affordable too. And that's why I do think live stream is so valuable, because it is quite affordable to do it. There's not a huge amount of super expensive tools that you actually need to get up and running.
Oh, for sure. I completely agree with you. Basically, if you've got a phone and maybe a ring light, a push. You talked at the beginning about how one of the things that you did was find the right people to tell the brand story. If you're somebody who's listening who has a brand, what tips would you give about where do you even start when it comes to figuring out who's the right person to collaborate with, or to maybe when it comes to content creators, for example, where do you even start?
It really is category dependent, in my opinion. I think certain categories lend itself well to working with different kinds of creators or different kinds of experts. So fast fashion, for example, might be or is perfect for, I don't know, Love Island people
Right.
and things like this. Whereas technology or an innovation, because it's a little bit more technical,
Yeah.
you have to have the knowledge and the trust and the expertise around how can you describe the ins and outs of the product, but in a way that people are going to relate to. So, and then you have experts, or you have more traditional creators or influencers. It really does depend. I think the key message that I like to say is there's probably not a right or wrong answer, but ultimately the people who do get involved in this industry and this world now are going to be so far ahead of everybody else in 6 months' time that they'll be able to carve out their niche and find what works for them and find the community that resonates with the way that they create content the most.
For sure. And it's also interesting. I was just thinking there, often as brand owners, we feel like we have to be the one creating content. But what you're talking about here is actually collaborations with other people who may already be comfortable in that content creation arena.
As a brand owner, you have to be protective of your brand. But I think that's where a clear brief to creators and selecting, a diverse range of people who kind of understand your brand, it is important. I think you want to give creative freedom, but within parameters, I guess. Yeah, that's where that making sure you have the right people on board is incredibly important. But that's not to say that just because you think that type X is who you should go after, sometimes that can often hinder your brand rather than help it grow. I think a key problem for some brands is that they don't actually know who their customer is.
Mm-hmm.
And they might think their customer, or they might want, oh, this is my brand, I want my customer to be this kind of person, but it's not always that way.
Right. So it's being realistic. And well, it's like figuring out, isn't it? It's data a lot of the time.
And again, I think this is where live stream is incredibly important, because everything is done through an online platform. It's so easily to track what's doing well, what's not doing well. And having spent a lot of time in bricks and mortar retail, that for me was one of my biggest pain points, is that I could not tell who was coming in and out of my store, what products were being interacted with, what people thought was too expensive, what they didn't like, what they liked, how the sales staff were interacting with people. There was so many variables and so many things left to chance.
Yes.
Whereas in live stream, you do have a little bit more of a data driven, logical approach where you can go, okay, well, we need to do more of this and we need to do less of this. One of the examples that I like that springs to mind is, whilst you're doing a live stream, as a host, you have multiple screens up at once.
Yeah.
And if you see that's a lot of people who are on the live stream are interacting with a certain product, or there's a lot of that product in the basket or being sold, you can encourage the host to actually talk about that product more. So it's live.
Yeah.
The best way I like to the people that have described it, it's QVC for Gen Z.
Yeah.
It's not a new world, but it's just been packaged in a whole totally different modality, and which is so relevant to the younger customer.
Yeah, so true. No, I totally hear you and what you're saying about bricks and mortar. I mean, my background, I spent probably, 17 years working in multi-store chains, and I remember having that exact same conversation. You can't see the garments that got taken off the rail and taken into the changing room and then put back. I mean, obviously there's lots of kind of new tech that comes in to try and capture some of these things, but it's not the same as you say, on e-commerce. You've just got so many data points that you just don't normally have the opportunity to look at. But that actually brings me on to my next question very neatly, which was about the relationship between the physical space and live streaming. So you touched on this, that you've obviously worked extensively in physical stores as well as on the live streaming. Do you see them as competitive, so trying to sort of replace the in-store experience, or do you see it as a complementary? If you've got a bricks and mortar store, would you also think that live streaming also has its place in that sort of environment?
Absolutely. I think you have retailers with millions of square footage of retail space across the country, well, across the world, really. You would only need one corner of one store, and you could potentially reach customers across the world. So I definitely see this as a very complementary industry. And it also will help brands sort of refresh and think differently, and how can we actually create a bit more of an experience around it. So yeah, no, I definitely think it's a very complementary industry. And I think you only have to see news stories. That there was a story on the BBC last year about 50 stores closing per day. And
Mm-hmm.
those stores could be studios in essence, and they could be repurposed for something else. And I've always thought of the store as a studio, and they should look like that. I think also if you go around sort of Knightsbridge and you've got all the beautiful big fashion stores, very rarely do you actually see many people in them. And
Yeah.
that for me just screams opportunity. It
Yeah.
screams this, you should be doing something with this. And feeding on from that, a lot of these sales staff, especially in these high-end stores, are I class them as performers. They're there to build relationships with people very quickly, and they have a very high repeat customer. So you will find people within those settings, in retail settings, generally speaking, that are or want to be in front of the camera and are comfortable to do so. I think when we was working with Selfridges, etc., two of the guys that we worked with were actually actors as well.
Oh,
So it
right.
kind of made sense that they were the face of all of our content, because they were doing it anyway as a living. So
Right.
yeah, it made a huge amount of sense.
So store staff as performers. And also, to be honest, if you're a store member and you're in a store that maybe has higher end products and maybe doesn't have the highest footfall, then you've got capacity, right? You could be spending some of that time live streaming.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's very rare to see a retail store busy 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. There are lulls within that time where those staff can be productive elsewhere. And it doesn't necessarily have to be live streaming, but it could be content creation. And it could be, whilst the store's quiet, why don't you just go and have fun with these products, or create something that can be shared online? And I think it's, if you sell something, if you don't, it shows that as a brand you're innovating and you're trying something different. And I think that there are other examples, amazing examples in the UK of retailers trying to be different from an experience perspective, and also offering a really unique solution. There is a retailer called Sook. I'm not sure if you're familiar with
Mm.
these guys, but essentially they say that you don't need a store 10 hours a day, 7 days a week anymore. You can rent that space by the hour, by the week, whatever it is that you need. And those stores are studios. And this was a conversation I was actually having with the founder about how can we integrate some kind of live stream into this. And it subsequently turns out, I think it was a few months ago, they did a live stream with TikTok LG in one of their sites in West London.
Mm-hmm.
So it's great to see it's becoming much more of a normal conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about if you've got a physical space, because I always think as well, physical spaces are designed to showcase products. So it makes a lot of sense that if you're in a physical space, you can then also use it for your video content because you're actually getting the chance to showcase the products there. I think it brings them to life in a way that it's even in an e-commerce studio. A lot of e-commerce players will have studios as well. But actually, there's something about it being set up as a store and being able to show product in situ. And it can sort of ignites people's imaginations, I suppose.
I really do think that you need to have products in relevant settings and be brought to life. Products in packaging behind a glass counter or 2D images on a white background, they don't work anymore. So retailers and brands have to think a bit more creatively. And from an e-commerce perspective, probably that is moving more towards video as opposed to still images. And in retail, that's less packaging on a shelf and more out the box, being brought to life, being talked about in an immersive environment.
Love that. So if you're somebody who's listening and you think, okay, all right, live streaming, and also, just as a side point, I was going to say it's being pushed by a lot of the platforms. TikTok are throwing a lot of their TikTok shop and really kind of bring that to the forefront. So if somebody's listening and they think to themselves, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go for live streaming, what would you suggest, or where would you suggest even starting?
That's a great question, because what I also think is really interesting about live stream is that there's virtually no category that can't benefit from it, whether you're a product or a service, hardware, software. Live streaming has an answer. When you think about how to live stream, you kind of got two schools of thought. You have this walled garden approach. So TikTok, for example. So you host a live stream on TikTok and the journey's held through there. So obviously the obvious benefit for being on TikTok is how many people you could potentially see your show.
Yeah.
The other approach is on the decentralized web. So hosting a live stream on your own e-commerce platform and, hosting a live stream where people shop already. They're the two kind of schools of thought. Which one's going to win? I don't know. I think there's an opportunity for both, but depending on the brand, if you're a huge, already very successful brand and it's maybe perhaps more of a brand building exercise, then hosting on the decentralized web and on your own platform is really important. And there's some incredible companies operating in that sense, and they've got some incredible solutions which make it a super personalized approach. So not only could that be one-to-one, so a very personalized service where it's a customer and an employee or a host, for example.
Right.
But there's also this one-to-many. So one host can be speaking to people in certain regions or globally. And yeah, from a TikTok perspective, clearly the size of the app, and I think it's surpassed 1 billion users. I think as a startup brand looking to grow and looking to attract new customers who otherwise might not know about you, it's a really affordable and a very efficient way. And yeah, they want to help. The team at TikTok want to help, and they want to actively get more vendors and more partners on the platform.
Sure. So it kind of depends on what the purpose is, if it's audience building or if it's brand building. And if it's audience building, you kind of want to go where the audience is. And if you're a small brand, then that's probably a platform like TikTok where you've got the reach. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, yes, you would like to go ahead, one of the things that often holds people back is they say, where do you even start? Do you turn the camera on and start talking through your best products, or what would you even suggest is a good topic for a live stream?
You have to think differently. I think if you go to sort of the east, or where live stream as an industry came from,
Mm-hmm.
there's a very hard sell approach. Whereas I think for us in the West, it's a more of a consultative approach, and it has to be more of a conversation. I think you have to act quickly, especially depending on where you're hosting this live stream, because people's attention spans are pretty low these days. So you have to grab people's attention, but also you have to continue grabbing their attention. So how do you get these hooks, and how do you actually make people stop swiping or go somewhere else? that's the key. That's a key element to me. So I think having a plan, it is important, but also being able to react to what's the data that's being fed to you, or react to the comments, because let's not forget, it's most of these platforms, it's not just the host speaking to camera, it's the host talking about a product, speaking and interacting with the community, saying thank you, reacting to messages from behind the camera. So yeah, it's not that easy to do it incredibly well, but I think there's no better way to do it than just to do it and just to try. There's a lot of support out there in terms of agencies that can help get people up to speed and can encourage people how to do it. I think also as well, just watching as many live streams as possible will kind of give you the tips on what works, what doesn't work. Potentially also having a co-host is really interesting as well, because you can just naturally bounce off people, and one can be more serious and the other can perhaps be more of a joker, or one can talk more about the technical specifications of the product and the other can just talk about why they love it. So yeah, having a co-host as well can always help, because it can put you at ease a little bit more too.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. And I think the kind of key takeaways are it can just open up your business to a whole new customer. And you mentioned at the beginning about building community as well.
Absolutely. I think community is a key term that is only going to become more and more important for brands. Everyone is fighting and competing for every single last penny. And I think if you can build a community that loves your brand, ultimately they're probably going to do a lot of the hard work for you. So what's incredibly important is that from a retail perspective, live stream should ultimately be a key part of their long-term strategy. Retailers can't think of this as a marketing play that they'll try it for 3 or 6 months. It has to be brought into the foundations of any brand if they want it to be successful. And the brands that do invest in it and do have dedicated teams around these things, they're the ones who are already seeing the biggest benefits. So I think the best thing for anyone to is just to research it and see how your competitors are doing. And if your competitors are not doing it, then perhaps the biggest opportunity of all to be a trailblazer in the space.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And you can connect with Rob on LinkedIn. We'll put his profile in the show notes. There you have it. I'd love for you to come over to Instagram at Resilient Retail Club. Let me know what you thought of today's episode. Let me know if you've ever thought about trying live streaming. And of course, if you have a moment to rate and review the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me. You can rate and review it in iTunes, or you can rate the podcast in the Spotify app. And of course, if you subscribe or follow the podcast, you will be the first to know about every new episode. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, then I invite you to check out resilientretailclub.com. The Resilient Retail Club is the membership for anyone wanting to start, grow, or scale a profitable product business. No more trawling Google trying to find the answers to your questions, or wading through general business advice that speaks mainly to service-based businesses. Whether you're still at the idea stage or you've been going for a while but want to get more focused and organised when it comes to your business, the Resilient Retail Club is the place for you. With a library of courses tailored to creative product businesses, several live sessions a month, and a supportive and active community, the Resilient Retail Club is the perfect membership to help you hit your goals faster. Check it out at resilientretailclub.com.